Erik the Red was a famous Viking who often found himself getting into trouble. It wasn't always intentional, and he wasn't very good at conflict resolution. When he was banished from his home, he set sail on the open ocean and discovered a new world that he would name Greenland. Here, he would found settlements that would prosper, but when a priest went to check on the colony in the year 1350, what he found was truly mysterious. Erik the Red was born Erik Thorvaldsson in 950 CE in Rogaland, Norway. It is unknown who his mother was, but his father was a man named Thorvald Asvaldsson. Although his father was not rich or famous in the Viking world, his great-great-uncle happened to be a Viking by the name of Nadod, who is credited with the discovery of Iceland. This lineage of explorers may have sparked Erik's own adventurous spirit, setting him on the path to become one of history's most notable Vikings. Erik would take on the moniker the Red from a young age due to his red hair and fiery temper. It just so happened that Erik's father also had a bad temper. Eventually, his father's temper would get the best of him when the King of Norway exiled him on the accusation that he had slayed several people. This development would force them to pack up and move to Iceland, where they already had some extended family. Starting anew in Iceland was difficult, and Erik would mature and change because of it. The harsh Icelandic environment taught Erik how to be resilient and resourceful, something that would come in handy later on in his life. When Erik was 20, his father passed away. He would soon marry a woman named Thjothild Jorunnsdottir. She was from a wealthy family, so the marriage proved advantageous for Erik, who had very little at this point in his life. To help them get started, his wife's stepfather gave the newlyweds some land, where Erik built a small homestead named Eiriksstaðir, meaning Erikstead. They lived a modest life, and they would have 4 children together, 1 daughter and 3 sons. Their daughter was named Freydis, and their 3 sons would be Thorvald, Thorstein, and Leif Erikson, who would later become famous for being the first European to set foot in America. Their homestead was large enough that Erik took on several slaves, known as thralls, to work the fields for him. On one occasion, the thralls caused a terrible landslide on the property of Erik's neighbor, a man named Vathjof. When this happened, Vathjof was furious. Vathjof called upon his friend Eolf the Foul to take revenge on Erik. Eolf went and murdered every single one of Erik's slaves. Obviously, Erik was not pleased about this, and with his fiery temper, things quickly escalated. Erik went and killed Eolf and one of his accomplices. Eolf's kinsmen didn't take lightly to the slayings and complained to the king. Just as had happened to his father, the king banished Erik from his land. Luckily for them, they were not banished from the country, and Erik and his family would start a new life on a small island off the coast of Iceland. Here, Erik attempted to create a fresh start, but his fiery reputation followed him, and his interactions with neighbors were fraught with tension. Life continued on until another trouble arose. Erik had inherited a few ornamental pillars that happened to hold significant mystical value, something that his father had brought from Norway all those years back. While Erik was building his new home on the island, he asked a man named Thorgest to keep them safe for him. After he was finished, and when he went to retrieve his belongings from Thorgest, things didn't go smoothly. When asking for his pillars to be returned, Thorgest refused to give them to him. This inflamed Erik's fiery temper. Surprisingly, he didn't react in violence, but simply walked away. A few days later, he returned and forcibly took back the pillars himself. Once again, things escalated. A brawl commenced between Erik and several of Thorgest's mates. Erik was very formidable in battle and ended them all. At this point, Thorgest was nervous and angry, since he knew that he could not beat Erik in a physical fight, so he instead decided to involve the law. A community council meeting called the Thorsnes Thing was called. The dispute between the two men was resolved, but it didn't go well for Erik. He was once again banished, this time from Iceland for a total of 3 years. This second banishment further alienated Erik from his peers, but it would also fuel his ambition to find a place where he could live on his own terms. After this latest scuffle, and being banished yet again, Erik figured that leaving was probably for the best. He couldn't seem to get along with anyone, and he struggled to follow rules. Now, he would go looking for his own land, far, far away. Around the year 982, Erik, his family, and a group of his Viking followers decided to check out a somewhat mysterious and little-known land that another explorer named Snebjorn Galti Holmstinson had unsuccessfully attempted to settle a few years before. Erik had only heard of this land through stories passed down, but he was determined to find it. Sailing west, Erik and his companions found the southern tip of Greenland, later known as Cape Farewell. They then sailed up the western coast, eventually finding suitable land that was seemingly ice-free and similar to that of Iceland. The more Erik explored, the more he liked about this new land. Upon a closer look, Erik determined that this land was not only free for the taking, but it was also a land that promised growth and future prosperity. He spent the next 3 years exploring all corners of the land, getting a feel for the seasons, naming places as he went, and claiming ownership. Although the land had not yet been officially claimed, it wasn't necessarily entirely uninhabited. The land had previously been occupied by an indigenous population who appeared to no longer be there. What was apparent was that they had left behind several things that would help Erik settle. The native peoples who once lived in Greenland left behind shelters, carved stone, and pieces of animal skin boats. Because of the extreme Arctic conditions in Greenland, it is assumed that many indigenous populations went extinct. Over the course of centuries, one culture succeeded another as groups died out and were replaced by newcomers. Despite the prior disappearance of the indigenous peoples, Erik's discovery of their remnants demonstrated that survival in this new land was possible. Their leftover belongings would become paramount in helping later civilizations. After his 3 years of exile were up, Erik went back to Iceland to report his findings. He went home with a book full of stories of a place he personally named Greenland. According to Erik's own words, he chose the name Greenland because he wanted it to have a more appealing name than Iceland, as people would be more attracted to go there if it had a favorable name. It is also believed that when he arrived, much of the land had not yet been affected by an ice age that would come later, so it was still very green. To build a successful settlement, it was necessary to have settlers. Erik went about gathering support from as many people as possible. By the time the next summer came around, he had amassed quite a following, and he would return to Greenland with 25 ships full of colonists. However, the seafaring journey would be treacherous, and only 14 ships carrying around 400 settlers would make it to Greenland safely. These colonists began their new lives in 2 places. An eastern settlement would be known as Østerbygd, and a western one would be called Vesterbygd. Over time, these 2 colonies would grow to between 2,500 and 5,000 people, with smaller villages between them. During the summers, when the weather was more favorable to travel, each settlement would send many men to hunt in Disco Bay above the Arctic Circle for food and other valuable commodities, such as seals used for rope, ivory from walrus tusks, and beached whales. Things were going well as they were now an established, self-sustaining, and prosperous colony, and Erik was the center of it all. He was now living like royalty and enjoyed the life of a paramount chieftain, a Norse ruler. Things were far better for himself and his family than they had been in Iceland. Instead of the frequent scuffles and problems with authority, they now lived on a massive estate in the eastern settlement and enjoyed great wealth. Erik's children, Thorstein, Thorvald, Leif, and Freydis, were entrusted to one of Erik's thralls, Turkur. Turkur took care of the kids, and they affectionately referred to him as their foster father. Freydis would grow up to become one of history's strongest female Vikings, and his son Leif would gain even more glory. Leif Erikson has historically been described as a wise, considerate, and strong man of striking appearance. When he grew up, he was requested by the King of Norway to serve as his retainer. Here in the Norwegian court, he converted to Christianity and was tasked by the Norwegian king to convert the people of Greenland as well. Erik, being a follower of Norse paganism, was very much against this. Nonetheless, Leif carried on. Leif, as well as his wife and mother, all became Christian. His mother, Erik's wife, even commissioned Greenland's first church. Despite this, Erik still didn't convert. Although Leif Erikson is well known for bringing Christianity to Greenland, he is even more famous for something else. On one occasion, while sailing from Iceland to Greenland, his ship was blown widely off course, and he ended up discovering a place he would later name Vinland, which was in North America, most likely modern-day Newfoundland, Canada. This new region was filled with forests and grapes, which led him to call it Vinland, meaning land of the wine. Leif returned home to tell everyone of his amazing new discovery. He would be credited as the first known European to set foot on continental North America, adding even more success to his family name. His journey to Vinland is widely celebrated as an early example of transatlantic exploration, and his descriptions of the land's abundance would be recorded in the Norse sagas. In the year 1002, a group of newcomers from Iceland brought with them a disease that ravaged its way through the colony. Many citizens succumbed to it, including Erik himself. The plague eventually died off and the colony survived, but Erik was gone, leaving Leif as the new leader. Leif is remembered as a capable and fair leader who worked to stabilize the colony in the wake of Erik's death, ensuring its survival during a difficult period. The colony would rebound and end up continuing for several hundred years more, but it wouldn't last forever. Sometime around the year 1300, the Little Ice Age occurred, freezing much of Europe and North America, and making the land nearly inhospitable. With unseasonal cold temperatures and unpredictable storms, the rivers began freezing over, and people were no longer able to farm, hunt, trade, or even travel. Livestock perished during the harsh winters, and food shortages became a constant struggle. Greenland's once thriving settlements grew increasingly isolated as the icy seas made voyages to and from Europe more dangerous and infrequent. Whoever was left in the Greenland settlements at this point suffered from pirate raids as well as conflict with other peoples such as the Inuit, who were now encroaching on the Norse territories. All these new troubles would lead to the colony's decline. In the end, the colony survived for 450 years in total before it eventually vanished due to the changing climate, among other issues. The collapse of the settlements marked the end of Norse expansion in the Atlantic. However, their final days are a complete mystery. Historians struggle to place the colony's demise on a timeline, as they believe it may have happened slowly. It's thought that the settlements were abandoned sometime between 1350 and 1400. In 1350, a priest sailed over to investigate, and what he found was shocking. When he arrived, he was startled to find the western settlement entirely abandoned and empty, leaving essential items behind. As well, there appeared to have been a struggle. The priest gathered enough evidence to cause him to believe that perhaps a group of North American or Inuit settlers had conquered the colony and killed all the inhabitants. 5 years later, the King of Norway and Sweden sent an expedition to Greenland to help any remaining settlers. Yet when they arrived, no one was found. Their reports noted the eerie silence of the settlements, with livestock roaming wild and homes left to decay in the harsh Arctic environment. The explorers surmised that famine, disease, or conflicts with indigenous groups may have contributed to the colony's fate. Further expeditions over the years yielded the same results, leading to the conclusion that there were no longer any Norse Vikings left in Greenland. While the colony did not survive, Erik the Red's legacy was not forgotten. His discovery of Greenland remains a crucial part of history, and his rags to riches story is one for the books. It is remarkable that the destitute young boy who left Norway would found a new land entirely, and that his son would be the first European to set foot in North America. Erik's daring adventures not only expanded the known world for the Norse people, but also laid the groundwork for future exploration. Thanks for watching History Expose. If you love uncovering the best stories in history, hit like and subscribe to keep exploring with us. Don't forget to visit our main page, Factinate, for more incredible facts about everything.